My brother's new girlfriend mocked me at dinner and everyone laughed. My dad told me to stop making the family look bad, so I let them mock me until she mentioned her job. Then I pulled out my phone and watched their smiles fade. My name's Jeremiah Scott. I'm 36 years old. The Sunday dinner table at my parents' house was always a performance, and I was always the guy in the cheap seats, watching the show from a distance. The centerpiece of the table was a floral arrangement so large it was hard to see the person across from you, but that was probably for the best. It muffled the tension. My older brother, Marcus Scott, the family's golden boy, was holding court, his voice smooth and confident as he described a new deal he was closing. Hanging on his every word was his new girlfriend, Delaney Cross, a woman whose smile seemed precision-engineered to be both charming and dismissive at the same time. She was the public relations star for the development group pushing the big riverfront makeover, and she carried herself like she'd already won a war no one else knew was being fought. Then she turned that smile on me. It felt like a spotlight hitting an unprepared actor. "Jeremiah," she said, her voice a little too loud. "Marcus tells me you're a fire investigator. That must be so interesting." The word hung there, dripping with condescension. All that smoke sniffing. I just nodded, pushing a piece of roast beef around my plate. But she wasn't done. She didn't just mock my job, she started probing. "How do you guys even store evidence for something like that? Is it all digital now? Are the photos on city servers, or do you keep them on your phones?" Her questions were sharp. Specific. The kind of questions a lawyer asks before a trial, not a public relations executive over dinner. A cold knot formed in my stomach. Her company was the one behind the redevelopment project, a project that just happened to be in the same area as a string of suspicious fires I was quietly investigating. I gave her flat, non-committal answers. "Everything is handled according to procedure." Across the table, my dad, Gordon Scott, shot me a look. It was his classic "don't you dare make this awkward" glare, the one that said my job was an embarrassment to be tolerated, not discussed. Under the table, my hand found the worn metal of my old Zippo lighter, a gift from my first captain. I started flicking it open and closed, the soft click-clack, a nervous habit that always grounded me. Marcus leaned over, his cologne overpowering the scent of the pot roast. "Just play nice, Jerry," he whispered, the command barely hidden. "We have to keep up appearances." That was the family motto. Appearances were everything. The dinner ended with Delaney patting my arm as I was leaving, her touch feeling more like an appraisal than a friendly gesture. "I hope your little cases don't get in the way of real progress," she said. It wasn't a joke. It was a warning. The next morning, an unmarked manila envelope was sitting on my desk at the station. No postage, no return address, just my name scrawled on the front in shaky block letters. I slid it open with my thumb. Inside was a single-typed sheet, the ink slightly faded like it came from an old ribbon printer. It was a detailed account of how a major redevelopment group was using arson to clear derelict properties along the riverfront. It described a pattern: small, hard-to-trace fires in abandoned warehouses, followed by huge insurance payouts. It even mentioned a specific amount, a donation of $28,000 made to a city council committee chair to fast-track demolition permits before a proper investigation could be completed. The note claimed the fires were deliberately set to look accidental, targeting the exact properties Delaney's group was slated to acquire. Her project. I read the last line twice. "They have someone on the inside, watch your back." The phrasing, the directness, it had to be from Old Man Hemlock, a retired fire marshal who hated corruption more than he hated retirement. He still had friends in the department, old-timers who saw what was happening to our city and didn't like it one bit. The tip sent a chill right through me. I thought about Delaney's questions at dinner, how they weren't just curious but surgical. I thought about how she knew just what to ask, what information would be most valuable to someone trying to outrun an investigation. The anonymous warning wasn't a surprise. It was a confirmation of the unease that had been gnawing at me for weeks. I pulled up the electronic access log for my office. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. A few entries for the cleaning crew, one for my captain dropping off a file. Then I saw it, an entry from last week for my cousin, Trevor Dalton. The reason listed was, quote, borrowing a phone charger. Trevor was the family favorite, always eager to please, especially Marcus. A few months ago, after some case notes on a different investigation had mysteriously gone missing, I'd installed a tiny, motion-activated camera. It was disguised as a smoke detector, positioned high in the corner of my office. I'd almost forgotten about it. I pulled the memory card and plugged it into my computer. The video files were small and easy to scan. I found the one from the day Trevor visited. There he was, clear as day, walking into my office. He didn't even glance toward the outlets where a charger would be. Instead, he walked straight to my large whiteboard, the one where I map out my active cases. With a smug look on his face, he pulled out his phone and started taking pictures of my notes on the riverfront fires, my theories, the addresses, the list of potential accelerants. Then he moved to my desk and photographed my sealed evidence log, the official, signed record of every single piece of evidence I'd collected. The footage ended with him quickly texting the photos, a self-satisfied smile on his face before he walked out. He was doing a favor for the new star, Delaney, trying to impress the person who had my brother's ear. The betrayal didn't make me angry. It made me cold. They thought I was a fool, the quiet, plodding brother who wouldn't notice. I wouldn't confront them. Pleading with my family had always been a dead end. They closed ranks around Marcus, always. This time, I needed proof that was clean, simple, and undeniable. Something they couldn't spin or explain away. So I built a trap. I went to my whiteboard and erased all the real case notes on the riverfront fires. In their place, I created a piece of fiction, elegant in its simplicity. I wrote down a fake chain of custody number for a key piece of evidence. A supposedly recovered fuel canister from the latest fire. It looked official. Authentic. Next to it, I added a handwritten note in red marker. Evidence moved to off-site locker number 7B. Miller Street Storage. Pending analysis. There was no off-site locker number 7B. Our department didn't use a facility called Miller Street Storage. The entire entry was a lie. Bait laid in plain sight. I adjusted my hidden camera to make sure it had a perfect, unobstructed view of the board. Then I left my office door unlocked for the rest of the afternoon and went out to inspect a minor kitchen fire across town. That night, my phone rang. It was my mom, Patricia Scott. Her voice was syrupy sweet, the tone she used when she was about to ask for something she knew I wouldn't want to give. She asked if I was doing okay, if work was treating me well, then she seamlessly transitioned. She mentioned how excited Marcus was about this new riverfront project, and how Delaney was a real go-getter. A wonderful addition to the family. It would be such a shame, she said, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial whisper, if some little misunderstanding at your job caused problems for the family's reputation. It wasn't a question, it was a command wrapped in a mother's concern. Before I could respond, my dad was on the line. He was always more direct. Your brother is building something important here, Jeremiah. Don't be the one to tear it down over nothing. Over nothing. The suspicious fires, the potential fraud. That was all, nothing to him compared to Marcus's career. They weren't asking me to stop looking into the fires. They were telling me. They had already picked their side, and it wasn't mine. I felt the last bit of warmth for them flicker and die out. I'm always careful, Dad, I said, my voice flat. I hung up the phone. The path ahead of me was now perfectly clear. It took less than 48 hours. I was reviewing some files when my phone buzzed with an alert from the hidden camera's motion sensor. I pulled up the live feed on my laptop. There was Trevor. He didn't even bother with an excuse this time. The video showed him walking straight to the whiteboard, pulling out his phone and snapping a photo. He didn't look around or check if anyone was coming. He was confident, arrogant. He was in and out in under 30 seconds. He texted the image before he was even out of the hallway. I knew exactly where it was going. The first piece of my puzzle was locked in place. Trevor was the leak, and I had him on video, time-stamped and undeniable. Now I just had to wait for the second piece. What Delaney would do with the fake information. I couldn't subpoena her phone records without tipping my hand, but I had another way. I called a contact in the phone company's security department, citing a potential leak in an active arson investigation that was compromising officer safety. It was a slight bend of the rules, but the situation called for it. He owed me a favor, An hour later, I had the data. The text from Trevor's phone in my office went to a burner phone, but the burner's location data pinged off a cell tower right next to Delaney's downtown office building at the exact moment the text was sent. It was her. My anonymous tipster, Hemlock, came through again. I'd reached out to him through a dead-drop email account. He had a contact, a disgraced security guy who now did gray area surveillance work for cash. For a small fee from my own pocket, I hired him to place a listening device in the car of a known fixer for the development group, a man named Caleb Morton. Morton was a thug in a suit, the guy they called when things needed to be handled quietly. 2 days later, a secure audio file appeared in my inbox. I put on my headphones and pressed play. It was Morton in his car, the sound of the engine humming in the background. He wasn't alone. Delaney was on speakerphone, her voice sharp and clear, stripped of all its dinner party charm. She was giving him instructions, her tone clipped and impatient. "The investigator moved the fuel can," she said. "It's in a storage locker on Miller Street, number 7B. Then came the words that sealed her fate. The words that I knew would bring her entire world crashing down. "I don't care how you do it, Caleb. Make sure that locker burns with the rest of the building. No trace left." She had just ordered the destruction of non-existent evidence in a non-existent building. I now had her on tape, conspiring to obstruct justice and commit further arson. The trap hadn't just worked. It had worked perfectly. Listening to that recording, I didn't just hear Delaney's voice. I heard the echo of my mother's fake concern, the steel in my father's warning, the self-serving ambition in my brother's whispers. They weren't just ignorant bystanders caught in the crossfire. They were complicit. They were part of the machine, the well-dressed, respectable machine that was willing to burn down a city block for a photo op and a fat contract. My goal was no longer just to solve a string of arsons. My goal now was to dismantle the entire corrupt structure they had built around themselves. And my family was a pillar of that structure. The quiet, methodical investigator had to be put aside. This required a different approach. It couldn't be a quiet report filed away in some dusty City Hall archive. It had to be public. It had to be undeniable. It had to be a spectacle. I accepted the cost right then and there. I would lose my family. But the truth was, I had already lost them years ago, one Sunday dinner at a time. This was just signing the paperwork. I couldn't take this evidence through the normal channels in my own department. The city council was in the developer's pocket, and my own chief was terrified of making waves. I needed someone with real authority, someone from the outside who couldn't be pressured or bought. I thought of State Fire Marshal Ruth Baylor. Baylor was a legend, an old-school, by-the-book investigator who had zero tolerance for corruption. She'd once investigated her own chief for tampering with a report and had him indicted. She was untouchable. I found her private line through a friend of a friend and made the call. I introduced myself and got straight to the point. "Marshal Baylor," I said, "I have evidence of systemic arson and obstruction of justice involving the Riverfront redevelopment project." I didn't give her everything over the phone. I just gave her enough to hook her. A mention of a recorded call ordering the destruction of evidence and proof of a leak from inside my own investigation. She listened without interrupting, the silence on her end of the line somehow more intimidating than any question. When I was done, she simply said, "Send me what you have." Securely. "And tell me what you need from me." I felt a wave of relief. "I just need you to be in the room when I make my case," I told her. She agreed without hesitation. The final piece was now moving into position. A week before the big Marina Gala, the first counterattack came. A story appeared in the local paper's online edition. It wasn't a news article. It was an anonymous opinion piece questioning the competency of the city's fire investigation unit. It was cleverly written, full of vague accusations and suggestive language. It specifically mentioned a lone wolf investigator with a personal vendetta against the riverfront redevelopment, hinting at a troubled past that clouded his judgment. They were talking about me. They were talking about the apartment fire I survived when I was 15, the one that took a neighbor's life. They were twisting the very motivation for my career into a weapon to discredit me. My chief called me into his office. He was sweating, his collar looking tight. Council members were calling him non-stop, he said, asking why he couldn't control his people. He didn't suspend me, but he did the next best thing. He put me on administrative leave, effective immediately. "Just until this blows over, Jeremiah," he said, refusing to meet my eyes. I was officially off the case. They thought they had sidelined me, cut me off at the knees. My dad showed up at my apartment that night. He didn't knock. He just used the old spare key he still had. He wasn't yelling. He was worse. He was disappointed, the way a king is disappointed in a court jester who forgot his place. He stood in my living room, refusing to sit down. "Delaney's people know you've been talking to the state," he said, his voice low and heavy. "They know you're not letting this go." He told me Marcus's entire career, everything he had worked for, was tied to this project. He said if I blew it up, I would be destroying my brother's future. He looked at me, his eyes pleading but hard. "Sometimes," he said, "the right thing to do is to do nothing at all, for the good of the family." I looked at him, and a final, painful realization settled in. He wasn't there to save me from them. He was there to deliver a final threat on their behalf. I just nodded slowly. "I hear you, Dad," I said. After he left, I slid the deadbolt into place. The next morning, I had the locks changed. Being on leave gave me something I hadn't had in months: time. With my active cases handed off to other investigators, I was free. I stopped looking at the burn patterns and started looking at the money. The anonymous tip had mentioned a donation. I started digging into the city's public campaign finance records, a tedious process of sifting through thousands of digital files. It wasn't a direct payment, of course. They were smarter than that. It was funneled. I found it after 2 days of searching, a $28,000 payment made from a Shell Political Action Committee called the Riverway Progress Initiative. The address listed for the PAC was a vacant lot downtown. But the filing agent for its creation was a law firm that had Delaney's development group as its only major client. The payment was made to the re-election campaign of the City Council Committee chair, who had personally fast-tracked every single one of their demolition permits, often overruling safety concerns from my own department. It was a clean, clear line from Delaney's group to a politician's pocket. It was bribery, laundered through the political system. I now had the motive, clearing the land cheap, the method, arson, and the cover-up, political corruption. All the embers of proof were finally glowing. My mom called again. It was a last-ditch effort, and we both knew it. Her voice was strained as she reminded me that the annual Marina Restoration Gala was this Saturday. She said Delaney was receiving a Community Leadership Award for her work on the Riverfront project. Then came the real reason for the call. Marcus wanted me there, front and center with the family. To show a united front, she quoted him, to show everyone that the Scotts stick together. It was perfect. It was absolutely perfect. They wanted me to come and perform my role as the supportive, lesser brother one last time, to keep up appearances. They were handing me the stage, the audience, and the spotlight, all wrapped up with a bow. They had no idea I was bringing a bombshell to their party. "Of course I'll be there," I told her. I even managed to say I was proud of Marcus. The lie tasted like ash in my mouth, but it was a necessary one. I spent the next 2 days compiling everything into a simple, 2-minute presentation. No jargon, no complicated charts. Just the facts, the video of Trevor, the audio of Delaney, and screenshots of the money trail. My last safe option, going through official channels, was gone. This high-risk public reveal was all I had left. The night before the gala, Marcus came to my apartment. He didn't look triumphant or angry. He just looked strained, tired. He didn't threaten me like Dad had. He tried to appeal to our shared history. He stood in my kitchen and talked about, when we were kids, about the treehouse we built, about how we always had each other's backs against the neighborhood bullies. "Delaney plays hardball, Jerry," he said, leaning against my counter. "That's just business. You don't have to burn the whole world down to prove a point." Then came the offer. He told me if I backed off, if I just let this go, he could get me a new job. A better one. Head of corporate security for the entire development group. It was a promotion. It was a bribe, For a second, a deep, pulling weariness washed over me. He was offering me an easy way out of the storm, a way back into the family's good graces. All I had to do was swallow the truth. But then I remembered the acrid smell of smoke from that fire when I was 15. I remembered the soot-stained face of my neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who didn't make it out of her apartment 2 doors down from mine. This was never about proving a point to him or to them. It was about the promise I made to myself that day, standing on the wet pavement and watching the embers float into the night sky. I would never again let preventable flames go unanswered. I looked at my brother, the golden boy, and I told him no. The look on his face wasn't anger. It was pity, as if he was looking at something broken. "You're all alone in this," he said quietly, and then he left. He was right. I was completely alone. But the alternative, living with their lies, becoming a part of their corruption, was a loneliness far deeper. One fragile, earned possibility remained: the truth, delivered on my own terms. The gala was a sea of fake smiles and expensive champagne held in a grand ballroom overlooking the marina. The air was thick with the sound of forced laughter and clinking glasses. I found the event tech, a young guy named Miguel who looked overwhelmed. I told him I had a short 2-minute tribute video for Delaney, a surprise from the family. I handed him a USB drive. "Could we just test it real quick?" I asked. "I want to make sure the audio is right." He nodded, plugging it into his laptop. For a split second, I saw my presentation, the photo of Trevor, the audio waveform, the bank transfer, flash on his screen. He queued it up. It was ready. During the award ceremony, after Delaney gave a gushing acceptance speech about integrity and community, Marcus took the microphone. He was glowing, his smile wide and genuine for the first time in weeks. "My brother Jeremiah couldn't be prouder of Delaney tonight," he announced to the room. In fact, he wanted to say a few words himself. "Come on up, Jerry." He looked right at me and winked. "We've got to keep up appearances, right?" The crowd chuckled. He handed me the microphone. The spotlight was hot and blinding. I walked to the lectern, my old Zippo, a comforting, solid weight in my pocket. I looked out at the 200 faces staring up at me. I found Delaney and my parents at the head table, their faces masks of smug satisfaction. I gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to Miguel at the tech booth in the back. "Thank you, Marcus," I began, my voice steady and clear through the ballroom speakers. "My family has always been about appearances, so tonight I'd like to show you all what's behind the curtain." The first image hit the massive screens flanking the stage, the timestamp photo of Trevor in my office, his phone aimed at my whiteboard. A few confused gasps rippled through the room. Trevor, sitting next to my parents, looked like he'd been punched in the stomach. Before anyone could process it, the audio file began to play. Delaney's voice, sharp and cold, echoed through the now silent ballroom. "Make sure that locker burns with the rest. No trace left." Her face went from a triumphant blush to a waxy pale white. Marcus froze, the smile dissolving from his face. My dad looked like he was going to be physically sick, and my mom covered her mouth with a trembling hand. Then, the final slide appeared, a simple flowchart showing the $28,000 payment from the Shell PAC, linked directly to Delaney's company, flowing into the council member's campaign fund. I didn't raise my voice. I spoke calmly into the microphone. This was never about progress. It was about arson, insurance fraud, and a cover-up that was orchestrated by the woman you just gave an award to. As the crowd erupted in a roar of shocked murmurs and frantic whispers, a side door to the ballroom opened. State Fire Marshal Ruth Baylor stepped in, flanked by 2 plainclothes state officers. She moved with purpose, her eyes fixed on the head table. She walked directly to Delaney. "Delaney Cross," she said, her voice cutting through the noise like a siren. "I'm going to need you to come with us, and I'll be taking your phone as evidence." The flash of news cameras was blinding as the officers escorted a stunned and silent Delaney out of the ballroom. My work was done. The fallout was immediate and absolute. The Riverfront project was suspended indefinitely, pending a state investigation that quickly widened to include City Hall. Marcus's social and professional world imploded overnight. His name was mud, his deals collapsed, and his friends stopped returning his calls. My parents tried to reach me, leaving a string of voicemails that swung wildly between rage and pathetic pleading. They blamed me for airing the family's dirty laundry in public, for choosing the truth over their reputation. I never called them back. There was nothing left to say. The insurance company, grateful to have avoided a multi-million-dollar fraudulent payout on the warehouses, gave me a quiet $50,000 whistleblower reward. It wasn't a fortune, but it was more than enough for a new start. I resigned from the city department a week later. The chief was just relieved the problem was gone. I didn't stay in town. There was nothing left for me there but ghosts and bad memories. I used the reward money to buy a small house in the foothills, a few hours away, surrounded by trees instead of whispers. The story had started with me at a tense family dinner, being belittled and feeling small. It ended with me on my own porch, reading a book, the only sound the wind rustling through the pines. I now work as a freelance consultant, training rural fire departments in fire prevention and investigation, helping people who actually want the help. I don't carry the weight of my family's expectations anymore. My revenge was public, surgical, and final, but the prize was private, a quiet life, honestly earned. Sometimes the only way to fix a broken system is to walk away and build your own. If you've ever had to make a tough choice to protect your peace, share your story in the comments below. Don't forget to subscribe and check out our next video.